So everybody, as Aline said, I am Laura Gomez and I work as a general partner in Latin Leap. I'm a serial entrepreneur and definitely a big dreamer. We are very happy and thankful to have you all here with us in the beginning of this ExO Quest sponsored by Latin Leap. So Latin America today, just to give us a little bit of context, has one of the world's weakest education systems and remains as the world's most unequal region. On top of this, in Latin America, 22.2 million children and adolescents do not attend to school or are at risk of dropping out each year. So we do think that we live in unprecedented times, as you might know. The speed of change makes the eternal catching up strategy of Latin America unsustainable. We need to leapfrog, and that is why we are all here. So we have to anticipate and together find ways to prevent the region from becoming, and some of you have heard me saying this repeatedly, what Yuval Harari calls in his book, The Useless Class. So our main goal with this adventure that we're starting today is to envision a better future for education globally. Latin America will be the sandbox to adapt new technologies, new methodologies, and create an ecosystem, hopefully, of novel solutions that help this region's most pressing problems regarding education. So with your help and contribution, we're seeking to leapfrog Latin America through the disruption of education. It's not a small dream to have. So that's Latin Leap's mission. And that is why together with ExO, we decided to create this quest. It is worth it. So afterwards, and having in mind all the discussions and highlights that will come out of this quest and the great vision as a guiding star, Latin Leap will create a fund to invest in solutions that take the region closer to that vision. Because we do believe that all starts with a vision. So this quest will bring some great minds like yours together to contribute and hopefully create this appealing roadmap to prosperity. We hope you are as eager as we are to go bold after this worthwhile goal. Así que bienvenidos y muchas gracias por ayudarnos a crear y a creer juntos en que podemos contribuir a un mejor futuro.
Many of you, if you're in the EXO community, will have heard me speak about this before. Ever since the book came out, we've been focused on how do we solve the immune system problem. We started with the EXO Sprint in big companies, and we've roughly cracked that problem now. We've now done 50 or so major sprints with Procter & Gamble, HP, Black & Decker, Visa. They are reporting an average 70 times return on investment from running the sprint. So we've found a way of hacking culture at scale in a big company. And this was, if you remember, this is my experience at Yahoo, where the more disruptive an idea we came up with, the more the company couldn't handle it, right? And that was a young company of less than 10 years old. What hope is there for a bank or a telco, etc.? We then set up the Fast Track Institute in Miami to do the same approach in public sector, because now you have to deal with regulatory policy, and that's a much harder problem. And we have an enormous issue globally in this area. Bankers are fighting Bitcoin, taxis are fighting Uber. And we have, as I talk about it, we have 20 Gutenberg moments coming along. The printing press changed the world in the 15th century, but solar energy changes the world. Blockchain completely changes the world. AI completely changes the world. And we have 20 of those, right? And in our opinion, this breaks every institution that we use to run the world currently. Journalism is now pretty much broken. Education is breaking or largely broken. We have, and Laura mentioned some of the issues there. And in fact, I can't spot an institution that doesn't break in the face of this transformation. The challenge is our leaders are not trained for this. Most of our leadership training today is 20th century status quo, incremental, linear, stable environments, and the train is pulling into black swan station, right? And finally, most of the action, certainly implementation, is happening at a very local level and then being implemented locally. So these are some of the broader dynamics that we have to solve for when we take our next step. Now, the fast track sprint, we've done several times, 4 times in Medellin in Colombia. We ran it with the mayor of Miami 3-4 years ago. And part of the reason Miami is such a hotbed right now is our fault a bit. We laid down the vocabulary that you hear coming out of the mayor and thinking about Miami as the future. In terms of the next step for us is how do we break the immune system in an institutional level? And we've chosen education as our first one to pilot this. Probably about one of the most important institutions that we could think of to start with. So we've been waiting for the right partner and the right opportunity to kick it off. And I'm thrilled with Laura and Latin Leap and the folks that she's assembled and the folks involved, that they're really thinking at a transformational level. And we check, early on we said, so do you want to transform this or this? And they're like, no, transformation, education, global. We're like, okay, we like this. And so we're kicking this process off. Now, as Laura said, we are recording this, but this is not a public event. This is, we want to keep this closed and small to a limited number for a very specific reason, which I'll talk about in a second. And the reason is we want to kind of do the deep thinking. That type of work is best done in a smaller group. Okay. Once you have the broad structure, then you can do open innovation in other areas. Something we found very powerfully when we were building Singularity University and also at XPRIZE, we have with us here Xenia Tata, who ran prizes at XPRIZE for a few years, and she'll give a few of her comments. We found that the young, energetic, entrepreneurial type were great at finding solutions, but not great at asking the right questions or finding the right problems. And so what we did at Singularity is we posed the faculty or the board would pose the problem spaces, the grand challenges. And once you have that, then you let the entrepreneurial mindset, the young, unstructured, freed from university, well, let me not go into that paradigm, but basically can then approach the problem from a very creative way and really come up with new solutions. So we, in this case, we're trying for something very specific, which is to figure out a path to solving the immune system problem in education, because the worst resistance to the transformation in education, or the people in education, academia, is about the second worst immune system I've ever come across. Religion is the worst, where they will literally kill you if you don't, comply with the thing. In academia, they'll kill your career, but they won't kill you physically. So it's a slightly better from that perspective. I want to give a quick anecdote here. About 4 years ago, I was asked to give a talk at the conference of 700 deans of business schools. Okay, who knew? But there's actually an event where all of the deans of the business schools get together once a year. And so I was the opening keynote. The organizer gets up, very excited, says, Salim is here to talk about the latest he's seeing in exponential organizations, et cetera, except from the audience, what you see is totally blank looks. They have no idea what he's talking about. He sees this and he says, looks around the audience and says, how many of you have heard of Exponential Organizations, the book? And out of 700 deans, 2 put up their hands, right? Now, not that everybody should read the book or whatever, but if I'm a car designer, I should know that Tesla is a thing, right? I should know about it and have an opinion position about it. And none of them had ever heard of this thing. And afterwards they were very excited, etc. But the challenge is they're all operating from old frameworks, right? And from a business school perspective, there is still not a single business school in the world that can teach you how to build Uber, right? And so we have an enormous challenge in updating education because of the regulatory. I'll give one last example, which is back from Singularity University, about 2 years into the development of SU. to deal with very fast-moving technologies, we created a real-time curriculum development methodology. So if there was some breakthrough in neuroscience or AI, we would convene the faculty, see how it affected the different disciplines, and be teaching that. The curriculum changed about 20% a quarter. 2 years in, we get a call from the California Board of Education saying, who are you? You can't be calling yourselves a university. And we said, well, what does it take? And it turned out that to be a university and to be accredited, you have to fix your curriculum and never change it, which is antithetical to the world, right? So we're like, but wait, we do it this way. In the end, they gave us an exception to the regulations and said, please don't give out a degree because we couldn't do what we were doing unless we, so I'm using this as a small example, but this pervades all of the education system. And I'll give one last example, which is Nicole Dreisky, who some of you know, who's created a program that in one weekend using media is able to increase literacy amongst kids by 100% in a weekend. The challenge is you try and get that into the curriculum and it's almost impossible. And so this is the enormous difficulty we have. The classroom has not changed in 200 years. Desks, chairs, teacher at the front, waving a stick and a chalkboard or whatever. I mean, this is, it's kind of a tragedy that we've not updated that model and what should it look like. So the issue here and the problem we're trying to solve is there's lots of breakthroughs in education. How do we get that into the system is the enormous question. And I want to show you a slide that we've developed to talk about this. So let me share my screen. And this is the process we want to follow in the quest, okay? So again, note that the objective here is breaking the immune system and coming up with some future sense of this. Can you folks see my screen?
No.
Yep.
Okay. So step one is let's bring together the 20 or 30 global most cutting edge thought leaders in education, the Esther Wojcickis, and if he was alive, Ken Robinson and the Salman Khans of the world who did the Khan Academy, et cetera, and bring them together into a group and discuss the major problem spaces in education. For example, today we do push-based education and we're moving to pull-based learning systems as we move on. I often ask the question, how much of your university education do you actually use in the workplace? And the answer is near zero, right? And the most valuable employees and colleagues and teammates we have in our companies and our teams are the ones that learn the fastest. And so that's a powerful paradigm. So bring them together. Let's explore the major problem spaces in education. Number two, give them a briefing of the exponential technologies and major breakthroughs that are coming. Neural implants, AI-based tutoring, blockchain-based micro-credentialing, et cetera. For example, via Xenia's work, the Literacy X Prize has now been won in Africa. We now have an Android app that can teach any child functional literacy in about a year, and it's free. And that, if I'm guessing most of the people that are senior in education globally have no idea, and this would change their view of education. I'll give one more example, which is a Chinese company called Lishuo, I think. I may have the pronunciation wrong. I probably have the pronunciation wrong. They've developed an AI chatbot to teach English as a second language. And it turns out this AI chatbot is 3 times better at teaching English than a personal private human tutor, and it scales, right? So we can essentially solve ESL, basically. And most of the educators in the world have no idea. I was talking to the education minister in Thailand. He was trying to hire 40,000 teachers to teach English. And you're like, excuse me, there's this thing over here. And you would save a massive, massive amount of money, hassle, difficulty if you could implement that. But try getting an AI chatbot approved by any academic environment and watch the immune system response. So let's get up to speed on what are the major breakthroughs coming, and not just the technologies, but what's the socio-political environment? Will we be dealing with UBI in the future? Most education today is designed for job schooling, right? We train our kids through their early 20s to be ready for the existing job market. Well, is that the right purpose of the future as we enter a world of abundance? And those are the questions that aren't getting asked anywhere. The third step in this is probably the most important, is let's do a 2-3 day retreat and paint a picture of what education should and could look like over, say, a 20-year period. And we picked that time period because it forces us out of the existing structures. It pushes us out of our comfortable boundaries, past any regulatory and day-to-day crap that we're dealing with. And it forces you to paint a picture. And I would suggest that that group of 20 people, armed with the awareness of what's coming, are probably the best group in the world around to paint that picture, right? Of what should it look like. And it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, and it won't be. It just has to point in the right direction, right? The fourth step is then to curate who's doing what. Now that we have a vision, who's doing what around the world, and let's curate solutions. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, etc. And the final step, once you've got some curation done, is to do a backcasting exercise and say, okay, if we want to do that in 20 years, where do we have to be in 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, etc. And now we have a roadmap. Now, what we do with this final output is not put it on a website, not do a TED talk on it, just keep it really low key, because the minute you talk about it, the entire academic world will find ways of attacking it. And part of the reason of getting these 20 thought leaders is if some random academic at the University of X goes, well, I disagree with this, you can basically say, go talk to these 20 people, and you basically have enough critical mass to ignore them, or at least have the folks that are making decisions have a little bit more respect about the future. So that's the basic process. One of the outputs of this, and the next step, we're trying to get control of what's called an IGO. IGO stands for Intergovernmental Organization, which is actually a nonprofit sanctioned by the UN with its address at the UN building in New York. And an IGO has the enormous, fascinating characteristic that you can sign treaties with governments, okay? So if we get the output of what education should look like, and via our access to various heads of state, get presidents, prime ministers to sign up to this vision of the future, over time, the education systems will start to point in that direction. At the same time, we're building grassroots products, services, investment opportunities, companies to serve that future. So that's the broad picture of where we're going.
Hi, I'm Lars Ling. I'm the head coach of the ExO Quest, and I'm here to give you a short introduction to what we want to accomplish in this quest. Let's get into it. The objectives of this quest are to co-create a desirable 20-year vision for the future of education. As part of this, we'll be describing relevant scenarios for what the world will likely look like at that point in time. This quest also backcasts to describe what needs to happen in 15, 10 and 5 years to make this desired vision a reality. You can also expect an actionable roadmap as output from this quest that will take us to this desirable vision for the future. The ExO Quest is a facilitated process. It guides the participants who all join virtually through a series of co-creation activities, including several thought-provoking awakening presentations that helps us all to open up our mind and think differently about what's becoming possible that was not possible in the past. So how does this work? We'll work together in virtual workshops that span all time zones, so everyone involved can contribute in their own work hours or spare time if you'll be spending your spare time on this. We'll present our discoveries and our learning and our suggestions to each other for constructive feedback and for discussions. Throughout the quest process, We are supported by a distributed research team that helps us to crawl the web and go through available reports and articles and other resources on topics that are selected by the Quest participants. For the Quest participants, this Quest process starts on September the 8th and ends on November the 12th. Our research teams are starting prior to that date. The Quest is designed and facilitated by Openexo and Fast Track Institute with support from the virtual community EducateforLife. I would like to thank our sponsor Latin Leap, which is a venture capital studio creating an edtech specialized fund to change the living conditions in Latin America and enabling a paradigm shift in education from scarcity to abundance. So in summary, we want to design a 20-year desirable vision for education that should leapfrog today's educational system in terms of value and positive impact that we can have on every human being on this planet. Because we can, and because humanity needs education to serve humans differently in the future. The future is already here, so the time is now to put in this effort to catalyze the change by design.
GMA 3. I'm so happy to be here. To break the cycle of self-doubt, you must find the place inside yourself where nothing is impossible. Digital Deepak is my mind twin.
There are no words to express the gratitude to all of you for being part of this. It has been such an amazing ride, and more than the methodology, which is impeccable, and all the resources that you brought very nicely to the table, which I especially thank you, Lars and Jerry, for always having prepared such an amazing sessions. Thank all of you again. I don't even have words to thank you all for your amazing inputs, your always availability, your tremendous energy, your thoughts for let us picking your brain, and I don't know, I really appreciate it. I can't say it enough.
Thank you, Lars and Jerry, and everyone who participated. I think the words that Laura mentioned, it is exactly what I feel and I see. And it was an amazing journey. And this is something that it's very important to change the situation of the kids and the teenagers in Latin America, and we are totally part of this. So thank you very much. You were amazing in terms of methodology, in terms of the level of discussions that we had here, and of course, all of the engagement of everyone here, Diana, Giovanni, Kim, and everyone who shared part of their time and invest part of their time to build this. So thank you very much.